to go out there and literally crawl up the stairs and drag my wheelchair up there to these houses and speak face to face. Always the first question was, how in the world did you get up here? Well, I didn't have an elevator. You don't have a ramp. I crawled up here. That's how important this is to me. And that's how important I think your vote is in this process.
Welcome to Cornhole Champions, a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line, where we throw bags at the state's biggest stories. I'm Zachary Oren Smith. It's Wednesday, 2 weeks since Election Day, and while the news cycle gives plenty of reasons to unplug, to turn off, to drop out, I always find time spent with the grassroots can shift my perspective. Today, hear from State Representative Josh Turek. He's a Democrat who once again convinced his red House district to elect a Democrat. And then we talked to Precinct Captain Extraordinaire Sharon Lake about the impact individuals can have if they're willing to hit the ground running. We talk about Iowa Senator getting snubbed and a pretty dismal report on the future of the ag economy. That's coming up on Cornhole Champions. So, Amie, we're called Cornhole Champions, but there are some other names that we could have been, and I wanted to go over a couple of those because I've heard a little bit of pushback on whether or not Cornhole Champions was the best possible name. Are you in?
Yeah, you probably heard some of that pushback from me, didn't you?
I'm talking only about our conversations and how hard you pushed back against Cornhole Champions. But this is the kind of island of misfit toys that I have in my Google Keeper app. I must ask you a question.
Nope.
Let me give you another read on that. I must ask you a question. I must ask you a question.
No, I get what you're trying to do, and no.
What about so everyone knows Iowa has 99 counties. What about 99 Problems, a podcast powered by Iowa's Starting Line?
It could work.
I don't think so. I think it's like
calling every single county a problem. Though.
It's like we came here to make. This is a name that came here to make enemies. This is a name that's trying to pick fights.
It's definitely a hater podcast at that point.
Are you familiar with Senator Chuck Grassley's tweets and kind of odd cadence, the use
so familiar.
Of
yes.
The use.
I'm a big follower of Chuck Grassley on Twitter.
It's kind of a holy text for me and my group of friends. I mean, he has a classic one. It's like a haiku. It's sorry about your pigeons. But it would have been written. So the podcast name would be written in Chuck Grassley tweet voice. Sorry about your pigeons. A political podcast by Iowa Starting Line.
If we're doing that, my vote is pants burn leg wound.
Pants burn leg wound is pretty powerful. I like the consonants in that.
Yeah.
Pants burn leg wound. That's powerful. What about the Official Family Leader podcast?
Yeah, we'll definitely get some good mail if we do that.
And since I'm not hearing any takers on any of those, it sounds like we're going to go with Cornhole Champions to the show. Right. First story, U.S. Senator Joni Ernst got snubbed. According to a report from Notice, Ernst expressed interest in joining President-elect Donald Trump's future cabinet. The U.S. Secretary of Defense carries an authority over the nation's military second only to the president. And with Ernst's military service and military policymaking experience on the Senate Armed Services Committee, she seemed like a good fit to become the first female Secretary of Defense. But the president had a different idea. Trump announced Fox and Friends weekend host Pete Hegseth is his pick. Hegseth is an Ivy League educated veteran and has contributed to Fox since 2014. Amie, something that continues to hold true in Trump world is that it doesn't forget. Can you remind us of what Senator Joni Ernst said about the people still in jail over the January 6th insurrection?
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure that this played a big part in it because you're right. Trump world does not at all forget. She definitely went on Meet the Press in January. So this is, obviously 10 months ago, 11 months ago, not that long ago in Trump world, and basically criticized his use of the word hostages to describe the people that basically participated in the insurrection of January 6, 2021. I don't think he probably liked that. I think the other thing that she said on Meet the Press was she wasn't going to outright endorse him. And she sort of positioned herself as a Nikki Haley supporter. So I think those two things are probably just like him putting a wall up and saying, nope, you're never going to get anything again. And then no amount of groveling, basically, no amount of groveling that she has done so far has basically convinced him otherwise.
And with this Pete Hegseth guy, there's this business of the sexual assault allegation. Can you explain a little bit of the background there?
So basically, I mean, the Trump transition team said they were sort of blindsided by it, but Pete Hegseth admitted to paying a settlement to a woman who accused him of sexual assault. Obviously, you know, if the Senate, which is Republican controlled, if they decide to, you know, consider that, that could be a problem for him. I think probably the betting money is that they will sort of just sweep it under the rug.
That's not the only kind of controversy that came up with Hegseth's nomination. Earlier this month, Hegseth was on the Sean Ryan show where he, again, argued women soldiers shouldn't be in combat roles. We're going to roll a little bit of tape on that here.
That's different than intentionally saying we're going to put women into combat roles so they will do the combat jobs of men, knowing that we've changed the standards in putting them there, which means you've changed the capability of that unit. And if you say you haven't, you're a liar. Because everybody knows between bone density and lung capacity and muscle strength, men and women are just different. And so if you want to, I'm okay with the idea that you maintain the standards where they are for everybody. Mm-hmm. And if there's some, you know, hard-charging female that meets that standard, great, cool, join the infantry battalion. But that is not what's happened.
So bone
What's
density.
that movie with what's her name? Oh, G.I. Jane. G.I. Jane explored this entire concept, and Pete Hegseth has not apparently watched it or did not take it to heart.
I haven't seen G.I. Jane. Should I watch G.I. Jane?
Oh, I mean, G.I. Jane's great. I mean, what was it, 90s or something? I don't remember, but yeah. I mean,
apparently I don't support women in combat roles. I haven't watched G.I. Jane.
We were supposed to be over this, right? The whole idea that women are not suited for certain jobs and can't do certain jobs or are taking them from men. Like, you see this all over the place. And you know, you thought that we were done with it. I mean, G.I. Jane was how long ago? Like, ridiculous.
Well, and particularly at a time where we're, as a country, having trouble recruiting enough people to join the military. I come from, I'm not military, but I come from a long line of veterans who served the country, who enlisted. And, you know, they'll tell you that right now it is a very small amount of the population that actually chooses to serve. You know, this notion that we're going to lop off 50% of the population from these positions seems, without considering the merits of their applications, without considering their bone density, I suppose, it just seems like kind of a wild move for someone who may sit at the second only to the president over our nation's military.
Yeah, not recruiting enough people will actually weaken the military. So if you want to do that, I guess nominate Pete Hegseth.
And just to tease this out, Hegseth is worried about the impact lowered standards and a lack of qualifications will have on our military. The Fox News host that may become our U.S. Secretary of Defense is worried about the qualifications women have to serve in combat roles. And I thought this was super interesting since he got his role despite not having the qualifications that a candidate like Senator Joni Ernst brought to the table. Say what you will about her politics. She's been a key military policymaker for years. She also has served this country. And Hegseth's nomination does, with some exceptions, require a confirmation from senators like Ernst. She told KWWL that she's taking this vetting of appointments very seriously. Here's some tape from that.
There are a few that have been nominated that we would just like to sit down and visit with. They need to go through a proper vetting. So it's hard to say at this point who is going to make it, who is not going to make it. But President Trump is nominating the people that he would like to see in his cabinet. So again, we have to sit down, we have to vet them thoroughly, and then make sure they're prepared for those roles.
I think Joni Ernst probably is pretty well respected in terms of like her military experience, like you mentioned in the Senate. And I think that if she, wants to throw her weight around and say Pete's not right for this job, she might pull enough senators off of it to not confirm him. It'd be interesting. I think it would be really interesting to be in the room when Pete Hegseth sits across from Joni Ernst and tries to tell her that women shouldn't take combat roles in the military. I would like to be on fly on the wall for that.
Joni Ernst's bio makes mention of her being the first elected congresswoman to have combat experience with the U.S. military. So just an interesting point.
Maybe
there.
she'll be the first sitting senator to have combat experience with the incoming Secretary of Defense.
Watch
Just
these
kidding.
watch these nominating hands. Second story, the Des Moines Register reported a new analysis by the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation showing around 11,400 Iowa workers have lost their jobs in the state's broad agriculture economy. That includes big ones like this summer's Tyson Foods closure in Perry, Iowa, that cut nearly 1,300 workers, as well as hundreds of workers being laid off in ongoing cuts at John Deere plants across the state. This broad pattern affects a lot more than just those plants. Everyone from equipment dealers to producers and growers are affected. Amie, you covered this in this morning's Iowa Workers Almanac. That's a newsletter that anyone listening can subscribe to by going to iowastartingline.com. Plug. It comes out every Wednesday. And Amie, can you explain a little bit about why this is a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, agricultural is obviously huge. Iowa is a big agricultural state. And this downturn is really, really affecting us. I mean, you're talking those 11,400 positions. You're slashing 1.5 billion from the state's overall economy. That's according to the Iowa Farm Bureau. Agriculture accounts for about 22% of the state's total economic output, and nearly 1 in 5 Iowans are employed in agriculture or ag-related businesses. So, I mean, the total jobs that we're talking about is more than 385,000 across the state. So if something big is happening in ag, we're definitely going to feel it.
That's yeah. I mean that scale of impact to a sector like agriculture, particularly one that's like, I think really I kind of nestled up, tangled up with a lot of identity for this state, being an agricultural state, being a farming state. Yeah, I can imagine this being a really shocking headline to read. Do you have any sense of what's causing it? Is there some trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, they're pointing to a couple things. I mean, one of them is prices just going lower. Now, to caveat this, they did reach a record high in 2022. But the problem is with growth that you always have to be growing, right? So like when it does come back down, that's really going to hit hard. And it's really been felt hard because most of our commodities are corn and soybeans.
Right.
And those two commodities have been very much gotten a lot of competition. Corn output has grown even in this country, which is already going to lower prices a little bit. But now you're seeing countries like Argentina, Brazil, and Ukraine are contributing to this glut of corn exports, and that's driving down prices. That's also the case for soybeans. Both beans and the oil exports are lagging because China, which is one of the largest importers of soy, is opting to make most of its purchases from Brazil. They have a weaker currency right now, so it's much cheaper to buy from them. The other problem is higher input costs. So this is like the equipment that you buy, the seeds, the weed killer, whatever. That really actually hasn't grown. It's actually decreased a little bit by about 1.3%. But the problem is the prices have decreased by like 13.8%. So when you line those numbers up together, you are paying much higher prices still for imports, and you're not getting that money back. So without any relief, I mean, farmers are going to continue to suffer. There could be some relief in the Farm Bill, though.
Can you tell me about how a farm bill would kind of fit into that? What relief could look like? I mean, we've been waiting for a new farm bill to be passed for how many? Where are we at? How long has it been since we passed the last farm bill?
They just keep extending it. They're extending the 2018 farm bill actually still. So I mean, there's been proposals that have come through. This latest one, Debbie Stabenow, just put one out on Monday. And that one, it's still vague. You know, I haven't really delved into the details, but it would do some things for this sector. It would include investments in creating more jobs by supporting manufacturing and entrepreneurship, small businesses, rural cooperatives. It would promote homegrown biofuels. That's a big one where a lot of our corn goes to ethanol, obviously. It would also include bio-based innovation through the development of new chemicals. So this could include soybeans and corn. It would provide financial opportunities for food and agricultural businesses to invest in infrastructure. So this could help, convince companies to stick around, and it would support those trade markets. It would actually invest 1.4 billion in things like the market access program and foreign market development program beginning in 2028. They've already tried to be investing a lot in this because they know that the position that we have right now with these commodities is sort of weaker. So they're really trying to shore it up in this new farm bill. But the caveat is the farm bill has been very contentious for a while. Are they going to get something passed, and when? Farmers are waiting and struggling.
Yeah. For our cornhole matchups this week, I've got a two-header. While we're still a few weeks out from the election, I wanted to spend a little time learning from organizers and electeds about what lessons we can learn from 2024. In 15 minutes, we'll hear from an organizer who helped juice record turnout in Johnson County this year. But first, we take a trip to western Iowa and hear from a state representative who won re-election despite his district's rightward surge. That's coming up on Cornhole Champions. State Representative Josh Turek is a Democrat from Council Bluffs. In 2022, he won his seat with a razor-thin 6-vote margin. This year, he built on that victory. He was just 500 votes ahead in a race of 11,000 votes cast. His House District 20 makes up a large part of Council Bluffs. It sits in Pottawatomie County, which President-elect Donald Trump won by a landslide, 20 percentage points. Trump was up in Turek's own district by 1,000 votes, more than 8 percentage points, and yet Turek, not his Republican opponent, will be seated in the Iowa legislature this January. How did Turek eke out a 5 percentage point win? He joins us today from Council Bluffs. Hello, Josh.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for joining me. I wanted to start a little bit with kind of like what's to be learned. There were a number of seats in the Des Moines metro, specifically suburban seats, that Democrats thought they might fare better in, but they didn't. Council Bluffs, I think, fits. It certainly fits that suburban footprint. And I wonder, from your vantage point, why were you successful in this district when so many of your colleagues in Des Moines were not?
I'll correct you on something first because I'm very proud of it. You said 500? It's actually closer to 600 than 500. So I'm very proud of those percentage points. It wasn't easy.
Absolutely.
It also makes a nice little talking point of I went from winning by 6 to winning by nearly 600.
Well, forgive me, please.
No,
100. I will not. 100 points. 100 votes matters.
Certainly does when you only win by 6 the first time. There's a variety of reasons as to why I think I was successful. This second go around, you don't know what you don't know the first time through. But we outperformed the top of the ticket by a pretty big margin that first time as well, even though we only won by 6. And so this time, to outperform by 14.5%. I took a lot of independence and a lot of autonomy in the way that we went about things. But I think if I were to break it down to a handful of things, one is I don't want to come across here as condescending or arrogant. I've only won 2 statewide races, so I can only speak to anecdotal personal experience, and I'm not here trying to preach and say that this is how we reinvent the wheel. First and foremost is I got an enormous amount of help from people within my community. We ended up getting a brick and mortar location this time in the center of Council Bluffs. And we had lots and lots of people that either went out and door knocked for me or wrote postcards or made phone calls. It was amazing, the team environment that we ended up creating. And I'm grateful to every single person. So this wasn't a singular, undertaking, but by no means. We had a lot of help. But the 3 things that I think make up the biggest difference is first and foremost is quality of candidacy. We have to have really, really good quality candidates. And that means somebody that is well connected in the community. Like for me, born and raised here in Council Bluffs, gold medalist, somewhat of, let's say, like a hometown hero. I've got deep roots here. I was educated here. I was born here. I was raised here. All of my brothers and sisters are from here. My family too. So quality of candidacy, but not only the fact of just having like hometown roots, but also someone that's involved and engaged in the community. And I have been with the disabled population here, disabled kids, and a legitimate resume. The fact that I'm educated, bachelor's degree, master's degree, all of these things compound into making a really, really strong quality candidacy. So I would start there. We got to have really, really good candidates to run. I think that that is probably 60 or 70% of the equation. And then the second portion is messaging. It's got to be a message that is applicable to your community and something that you have a credibility speaking about too. And so for me, I had made a decision really, really early on that a failure, I believe, of a lot of modern politicians is this knee-jerk reaction to feel like they need to weigh in on every single issue, whether that's a city issue, state issue, or national issue. And I just decided early on, I'm going to be trying to play chess up here, not checkers. And one thing that I absolutely can control is what comes out of my mouth, either in private or public, and what I weigh in on. And so I went out there and I spoke about just a handful of things. I spoke about environment, which was, we all care about clean air and clean water. I cared about economics, and particularly in a border community like mine, Council Bluffs, I talked about raising the minimum wage and trying to create a better economic environment to be able to compete with Omaha. And then what I really leaned in on was supporting our public schools, because I'm a huge, huge believer in that, and the ESAs and private schools, what has happened. And I knew that that pulled really, really well here too. And then healthcare. I leaned in very, very hard in as well, being somebody with a visible disability and being able to speak with it. Yeah, I had 21 surgeries before I was 12 years old. I've experienced the need for healthcare firsthand, but then I've also been involved in nonprofit and for-profit. So that was, I had an immediate credibility speaking about that. And I lived there. And I that worked very, very well for me. When you're crawling up the stairs and talking to someone, and I say, here's what's happening to, particularly disabled individuals in this state, or here's what's happening with the lack of affordable health care. That was the singular issue that I found was unanimous in its support. That in this country or in this state, the fact that we spend 3 times more than any other country on our healthcare, and we get by far the worst outcomes. And then what's happening here in Iowa with providers or reimbursements rates, or like the 22,000 Iowans that we have on disability waivers. I found that was unanimous in the support of people saying, you are absolutely right. We pay too much for healthcare. We don't have enough access. And again, speaking to a credibility on that. So that was absolutely fundamental, important. And then the last component, and again, this cannot be underscored, is the importance of hard work. And I went out there both times that I won election, and I went out basically for 4 months, 5 months, and 7 days a week, unless I was out of town for a reason. I went out and knocked doors every single day, and it was every evening on the weekdays, and it was essentially from noon until the sun went down on the weekends. And that is really, really important, especially on these state races, where we're representing 35,000 people or whatever the exact number is. We have the ability to nearly get in front of every single person if we work hard enough. The fact that, like, somebody like me with a disability, to go out there and literally crawl up the stairs and drag my wheelchair up there to these houses and speak face to face, always the first question was, how in the world did you get up here? Well, I didn't have an elevator. You don't have a ramp. I crawled up here. That's how important this is to me.
Yeah.
And that's how important I think your vote is in this process.
You talk a lot about messaging in your campaign and why that was an important feature important to your win. And I wonder if you feel that other races, that the messaging's being gotten wrong, right? That people are maybe misunderstanding what works in Iowa, what Iowans are prioritizing. And I wonder for you, what have you learned knocking doors? What have you learned on the ground?
It's a great question. Yeah, I really believe that it's our messaging, and I think that's probably no, I think that's why we're losing races statewide and nationally. I think that we need to return to an economic populism message, much like Bernie or like a Ro Khanna. If you look at the metrics, that the people that we have lost the most have been the blue dog Democrats. And I think that is really, really important that we lean into that. To me, that is really the essence of what we are as a party at our best, is we're really looking out for the masses, that we are we are the party of the middle class, of even the less fortunate. We're the big ticket party, and that they are the party that is looking out for the donor class and for the large corporations and for tax breaks and for privatizing all these systems, which ultimately end up affecting the most vulnerable. I think we've got to get back to that messaging, and that applies to it. And so when you're at whatever level you're out there talking to people, I think that's what it's got to be. We're going to raise the minimum wage. We're going to bring back manufacturing jobs. This prairie populism that, even you go back to my political hero Tom Harkin, what he was talking to, and you can lean in on that, on healthcare and pharmaceutical costs, and then clean air and clean water. There's more than enough of these issues that we know full well and that people appreciate on the big issues, the important issues, the issues that apply to 100% of us. But I think too often we get distracted by these culture war issues. But I think if we're going to be successful long term and we're going to shift this state around and then this country around, I think that's the messaging that we've got to use.
But I imagine if you're looking around in candidate recruitment, that you're not going to find a Josh Turek in every district, right? You've got to find different. But you nonetheless have to find candidates to fit the bill. And I wonder for you, what are there some characteristics? Are there some things that you look for when you're, someone approaches you and you think that make you think this person would be good for office? This is the kind of person we ought to be running.
Yeah, I think we need to put more time and energy into candidate recruitment and start it really, really early. I mean, I think 2026 is going to be a blue wave like we haven't seen since the Watergate time.
Why is that?
Well, I think historically, when you look at what has happened when one party has dominated and they're going to control the executive branch, they're going to control the legislative, they're going to control both the House and the Senate. I think that we are going to have a very, very compelling argument of we need balance, we need competition, and we're also going to be able to make that message in Iowa as well. But I'm talking even more nationally. Trump is a very, very divisive figure. You just look at historically what has happened. Look at 2018. That was a good year for Democrats. So I have absolutely no doubt that in 2026 we will have a blue wave if we are prepared, if we are organized, if we are coordinated with our message. We will have a very good year, and I mean that statewide and certainly nationally. There's no doubt about that in my mind.
And so, connect that to candidate recruitment. So you're saying that because you're going to have this unprecedented blue wall.
Candidate recruitment. Sure, candidate recruitment. What are we looking for? You are looking for someone again that has deep ties to the community, that has a good resume. But I would say more than anything, I would say if you're recruiting a candidate, you should ask them two questions. You should say, are you willing to go to the doors and have conversations with moderate Republicans or independents and be able to sell your message as you as a candidate or as a Democratic message? If you're unwilling to do that or think you have an inability to do that, then I don't think you should run. And secondly, I think that you should ask people, particularly in competitive races, is are you willing to get out there and do what is undeniably difficult work? And that is getting out there and making phone calls and raising money and knocking doors and talking to people. All of it's, I mean, it's not the most fun work. It truly isn't. But if you don't say yes to those two things, then I don't think you should run.
Door knocking, it sounds like is a tremendous. It sounds like you find a lot of value in it. It sounds like something that you take very seriously for anybody looking to do the work you do. I've heard some criticism from that Democrats haven't been registering enough voters, right? That there's not been like that. This is like a really basic thing that Democrats need to be doing more of. What do you make of that criticism? Do you think that there's some truth there? How do you think about it?
Yeah, there's certainly some validity to it. Again, I think that the typical way that this works is go out and knock some non-affiliated doors, but then really lean into the GOTV, the get out the vote, and just galvanize your own side. Well, I think certainly in my district, and I think that Iowa mimics it identically, is that even if we get our side completely galvanized, the math doesn't work. I mean, ultimately, this is a math problem. And so for me, basically up until the last week, I knocked almost exclusively just what I found was middle of the road to moderate Republicans and independents, because the independents are ultimately kingmakers too. Every single year you get more and more non-affiliates, and so those are the ones that you've got to win with, and I think that has been an error as well of focusing just on galvanizing our own side. And then, like you said, we have to get more people involved in the process, and particularly young people. Out here in my district, it's a huge concern. Carter Lake turns out in pretty big numbers. Council Bluffs, I think we have the second lowest voting turnout in the state. And so one of the things that we focused on is, let's get out there and let's not necessarily talk to people that are in our van accounts or on there that are typical voters. Let's get more people registered, involved in the process. And something that I'm very proud of, along with outperforming the top of the ticket by a big margin, was we got 500 more voters in my district to turn out than we did 4 years ago. Well, that's nationally not usually what has happened. So I think that's got to be part of the calculus too.
Can you describe just a little bit? I think most folks, unless you've looked at a map of House District 20, you may not realize that Carter Lake is kind of an oddity in Iowa district making. Can you kind of describe like why, where Carter Lake is and kind of why it's an interesting piece of your district?
Yeah, if you want to know where Carter Lake is, you don't need to look at a map of Iowa. You need to look at a map of Nebraska. It is one of these oxbow enclave lakes, because 150 years ago, the Missouri River ended up switching its channel, went up with a flood. And so for 50, 60 years, it was kind of this lawless land of nobody knew who controlled it. Had to go all the way to the Supreme Court because was it Nebraska, was it Iowa? And so because it was this land of lawlessness, you had a lot of gambling and brothels and all this kind of. It's a unique place. It certainly feels very different. I think the people have kind of kept that mentality to some degree. And it also provides a very unique challenge that almost no one else within the state would have to deal with, which is, for me to get to that portion of my district, I have to cross the bridge, go into Omaha, drive through all the way downtown Omaha, almost get to the airport, and then cross up and get there. So, from my house, it's probably a 25-minute drive.
State Representative Josh Turek is a Democrat from Council Bluffs. He'll return to the Iowa House this January. Josh, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Six votes to 600 is pretty good, I think, for a re-election bid. Amie, what'd you make of that?
And he made a name for himself this session. I mean, in his first session, he's introducing bills that nobody was really thinking about before. The Work Without Worry bill, which you and I have both written about, that would help people who are disabled not get kicked off of their healthcare, which is huge and probably not something that a lot of able-bodied legislators think about or experience. So I think stuff like that, and writing about him got him in the news, and that probably helped, a little bit. But he's right. I mean, when he has to physically haul himself upstairs to talk to people, I think that is really meaningful for people. As a voter in Council Bluffs, I bet I would definitely consider Josh Turek. If he's going to work that hard to get my vote, he'll probably really work hard for some issues.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult because lessons learned in Council Bluffs won't necessarily work in Mason City, won't necessarily work in Keokuk, won't necessarily work in Burlington. Yeah. But like I did appreciate, Josh clearly has some issues that when he's in his wheelhouse on an issue, like you can hear in his voice just like how much he's thought about, how much he is like laser focused on one of these. That candidate recruitment piece I thought sounded like a really important mission for this state as we're trying to get people who reflect our values into power. Right, it's like finding people to carry that standard. Another thing that I really dug from him was his just commitment to hard work. Right, that if he says that if I can. I have the ability to shake the hand of every person in my district, right? Like that's, as a local legislator, right? Like that's what a mission statement, right? To say that I'm gonna try to do that. But not everyone who wants a better Iowa wants to run for office. While we need Iowa's best to lock in for the future, we also need organizers laying the groundwork for the future. I walked up the street here in Iowa City to chat with Sharon Lake. She's a hopeless lover of door knocking and the power it has to change our towns. Since Obama's '08 campaign, she's been a committed organizer in Iowa City and has some insight from more than a decade of organizing Iowans. That's coming up next. In a country that got redder, Johnson County, Iowa tried to be as blue as it's ever been. And it was successful. Not only did the county break turnout goals, the county put Democrat congressional candidate Christina Bohannon past the top of her ticket. As we're taking stock of what works and what doesn't, the answers are always at the grassroots. And that's where Sharon Lake lives. Sharon Lake of Iowa City holds no elected office. She is not a political megadonor, and she has no dark connections to big DC power brokers. But I would argue she's been on the ground of an important Iowa story. She's part of a neighborhood organizing group that's been getting some attention for hard work during a grueling year. Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Zach.
Like many Iowa Democrats, the '08 Obama campaign was a really formative one for kind of your political life. Can you take me back to that moment? I understand your husband was involved prior to the caucus. Is that right?
When Obama won the nomination, then it was time for the Obama campaign to run a general election.
Right,
here.
right.
In between the caucus and the general, they're kind of invisible. They're in other states trying to win the primaries, but then they come back, get going on the general. Their organizing model was going to be to have a team in every precinct. So our great organizer, whose name was Franz at the time, Franz said, okay, so the first thing is you don't really have to do anything, we'll get a group of people from your precinct together, we'll invite them, and I'll tell them, what we're going to do, and we'll get going, and, you don't have to do anything. So the night comes for the event,
No one showed up.
Nobody showed up except Franz, our organizer. So I was like, okay, I can see what needs to happen here.
And if I can jump in, it feels like this is a good time to sort of talk about maybe the organizational structure, right? I think for folks like me, we're not necessarily privy to the kind of way that a campaign thinks about trying to get a particular candidate, a particular issue, popularity in a particular area. Tell me a little bit about kind of how that campaign was organized, the precinct structure.
I mean, the behind the scenes stuff was pretty opaque to us because we were just doing what we were asked to do. It's only later, after going through many cycles, that we've learned a lot about what happens behind the scenes. So what it looked like was that our organizer would bring me a box that had walk sheets for our precinct. They didn't really train us at all. They just brought these boxes and they were like, so knock these doors. The walk sheets have the name of the person on it, that you're going to talk to. Obviously the address. It'll have their age and their gender and what their party affiliation is. Mm-hmm. And then, then you have a script, and you are to ask them certain questions, which will change throughout the campaign. What they're trying to do at this point is identify their supporters. They responded yes to, are you supporting Obama? Or that they responded maybe, or that they responded no. So depending on those responses, you get your next, batch of who you're going to go talk to, and trying to get as many yeses and know who those people are. Again, we didn't have that much direction, Yeah. We just developed our own way of convincing people and explaining to people why that was a good thing. So
for sure.
So that was the Obama campaign. It was fun. We got to know, we became a tight group. There were about 12 or 15 of us. We got to know our precinct like nobody's business. It was a lot of fun. We were jazzed. We were doing the good work.
I want to hear you talk a little bit about the difference between organizing ahead of the '08 campaign and organizing the 2012 re-election campaign for Obama. In 2012, that's the year that Governor Terry Branstad came back to office. And a lot of Republicans think about this as like kind of the beginning of kind of the rightward trend, right? That the state is currently kind of in the cycle of, right? I wonder, what did you see then that was different from that '08 organizing period?
Well, it was not quite as laissez-faire, I will tell you that. And one was, I think they realized that every precinct wouldn't have a strong team. Some did and some didn't. So they combined precincts. So you'd be working with, across maybe 6 precincts. And they got a lot more strict about the numbers. For example, one day it was raining really hard. I don't mean drizzle. We are fine with drizzle, but it was raining really hard. And so they're coming back. So I called the organizer at the time and I'm like, it's raining too hard. And he starts yelling at me, what? You make them go back out. I can't do that. We're volunteers.
Right.
He goes, so we're going to lose the election because you guys are afraid of a little rain? I was like,
Yeah.
They would put so much pressure on the organizers for their numbers that the organizers would pressure that down to the volunteers.
Right.
So I know we all knew by then the Tea Party and all this stuff, but it was definitely, a different organizing model. I had wanted to know when I was running my precinct all by myself with my husband, John, who's the other precinct captains? Like,
Right.
I'd like to talk to them. What are they doing? How can we? And they just kind of kept all that information quiet, like, oh, we don't know or whatever. But this way I got to meet the other people who had been organizing so that we could share things that worked for each other and how to do this, because we were learning and teaching ourselves how to do it. The campaign wasn't really teaching us.
And post 2016, I mean, President Donald Trump is elected for the first time. I wonder if you could tell me about how that motivated the creation of the East Side Democrats in Iowa City.
What we saw in 2016 was the best and the worst, I guess, of having campaigns that were run from the top down. The 08 was really kind of very grassrootsy and we could do our own thing, but campaigns became more and more top down of how things were going to be done, and especially in the Hillary campaign. But after she got the nomination, the organizers that were sent here didn't know what they were doing, and by that time we did know what we were doing. They did not. We lost all this time because we had people here who did not know what they were doing. And we were very frustrated, and we felt like most of our organizers we have loved. They are hardworking young people who are very smart, but they have to take their orders from above and they have to do what's being told to them above. And it doesn't always make sense. What they want us to do doesn't always make sense in our area on the ground. Right after that election, I mean, that's when it's a very different feel after Donald Trump's victory this time than last time. The first time we were just like reeling from it. One of my friends who I'd worked with in 2016, and her name's Tara, and Tara and I were sitting there afterwards and we just kind of looked at each other and we were like, we need to start an ongoing group. We didn't really know exactly what that meant, but we were like, we can't have these cycles where there's months and months of nobody doing anything and volunteers aren't ready. What did we learn? It takes time to build a volunteer base. You cannot do it in 2 months. It takes a whole year to do it. So we're going to organize year round, and let's just start doing this.
There are certain, you identified that one of the challenges that the top-down structure had imposed on y'all was stopping and starting before each election. It's hard to have a list of volunteers. It's hard to have a list of potential donors. It's hard to have a list of organizers on the ground in precincts if you're starting and stopping a couple of months ahead of each election. Tell me about what else you learned in the process of running the East Side Dems.
The most important thing was talking to people. So, for example, the campaigns, again, I understand why they want data. It's very important. But because they wanted data, and I told you we'd get a list of people to talk to, they would say like, well, if you go to a door and the person's not there, you just leave. You don't talk to anybody else. We only want to know about John Doe. We don't want to know about Jane. We don't want to know if John Doe is moved. We don't want to know about the new people. And we just didn't agree with that. We found talking to whoever was there was valuable. Did it produce data? No. But there's lots and lots of intangibles that are very, very valuable. And they would their thing was, get through they want us to get through their list, and they would give us, lists of 40, 45 people. They want us to get through the list. And if you spend time chatting at the door with somebody who's not on the list, you're not getting us data. And we're like, sometimes what they don't know doesn't hurt them, What we found is that volunteers know a lot, and we put volunteers at the center of how we organize things, meaning making it a good experience for the volunteer, but also good for volunteers means meaningful. Volunteers want to do something that, they're busy. We're all busy. So they want to show up and know, hey, I'm going to work for the next 2 or 3 hours, and it's going to make a difference because I trust these people, and I'm going to make a contribution. And they can tell, if they're going out and they're told, well, don't talk to anybody, or no, you can't go with 2 people. Like, that doesn't make sense. That's not a good experience for the volunteer. If they would rather go with somebody, like, we talked till we were blue in the face, but the campaigns wouldn't understand. We just started doing things the way that we knew would make good experiences for the canvassers, but also it's good for the campaign. We're trying to win this election too. We're with you.
Right. Sharon Lake is an organizer with the Iowa City East Side Democrats. Sharon Lake, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Hey, you're welcome, Zach. My pleasure.
So a fun fact about Sharon Lake, I found her in a story from The Nation written by one of my favorite Iowa writers, Dave Lesh. Apparently she told him I can't quit knocking doors until and I quote, get the ultimate experience of a naked person coming to the door. Hilarious. Hilarious.
She wants that. She wants that.
She wants that off chance. She's waiting on that off chance. And I imagine, like, she'll like look the person in the eye and say, and like, dust off her hand, say, my work here is finally done. Finally, I may sleep.
That's why they carry clipboards. They can just like strategically position so they don't have to see these things. Don't actually put that out there, Sharon, because now everybody in Iowa City is going to be like, oh, it's door knocking season.
You got to be careful, Sharon. You got to be careful out here. Thanks to both Representative Josh Turek and Sharon Lake for joining for the show. That was another episode of Cornhole Champions. If you like the show, please rate it, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And sign up for my newsletter at cornholechampions.substack.com. For these stories and more, go to iowastartingline.com. Cornhole Champions is a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line. We'll see you with another episode next Wednesday. Until then, I'm Zachary Oren Smith.
And I'm Amie Rivers.
Thanks for listening. Say it. Say it with me. 3, 2, 1. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.